Now you can see this rose is looking a bit sad. It's been at the bottom of the pile and it's got all squished and squashed. So what I'm going to do is steam it and try and bring it back to life. And I've got another one here. So they've dried now, and as you can see, that's perked them up no end. These are vintage roses, by the way, glued and stitched on a wire frame. Now, I've just pulled a little bit of cinnamon out to use as a an example. Now, sometimes when you want to attach flowers, you want to see the stem for some reason. You might want to have it, poking up in the air there, and have two of them poking up in the air like that, which is quite attractive. And then you just need to stitch them down here or glue them here. But sometimes you don't want to see these wire stems, so you can bend them back on themselves and give yourself a good thing to stitch. For example, you can stitch through that loop and you won't see the stems. So that's another way to affix flowers with a wire stem. And obviously, when you're trying to fix, say, 1 or 2 flowers or 3 or 4, you've got to think about placement. And sometimes, like, you can slide the wire under that one, for example, if we were using these two. But you've got to balance them. So it's got 2 leaves on that side. So it might be nice to have a couple of leaves on the other side. Now, I'm just using odd flowers and foliage that happen to be available. They're not matching, but there we are. So you might want to add there or there so that you get more of a flow. When you're doing any decorations on hats, you need to try and get some sort of flow. Now, with feathers, sometimes that's easy. They bend, they fall. But with bigger items, sometimes that's not quite so easy, so you've got to think about it carefully. If you're using non-millinery flowers, for example, these, were bought in a cheap shop. What I tend to do is take all the flowers off with my scissors and the leaves. But I don't want the plastic parts of the leaves, so they can get chucked away. Pull those out. There we are. Let's have sunflowers. No, that's not a very nice bit there. Let's get rid of that. So what I've done is and what I want to do is I want to cover up the plastic because that's not very pretty, so I've got to arrange them. Now what I would suggest you do is use a little piece of beading wire, so that's what I'm going to grab now. So what I'm going to think of doing is some nice arrangement with these little flowers. So I'm going to cut myself a piece of wire. And because I didn't want the leaves as they were, I'm going to poke that flower through that leaf. So it gives me a better effect when I join them all together. So I'm going to hold those like that. And I'm going to wire them. Okay. And then I'm going to look and see what else I've got. I'll put those there like that. Oop. Bit fiddly. Oh, can't get that flower in place. That's just... I'll have that on there. So as you can see, what I'm doing is I'm making a little spray that will go very nicely on a hat there. And I've wired it, and I can now cut that wire and stitch it to the hat. And if I need to add more flowers in, I can. Might add another one in there. They can either be glued or wired. I mean, if you feel you're going to see that, you can cover that with a bit of ribbon. But to be honest, I don't think you are going to. Once it's stitched down, you can see it's hard to see the joins. Now, what you should do at the end is always put the flower the other way round, so that you finish off your rough edge, your rough end rather. So put that flower that way round and wire it. There we are. And there we are. There you have it. You can stitch that down, and it's neat at both ends. You haven't got any nasty bits that are showing, and that would look, actually that would look very pretty on a comb, wouldn't it? And you can do this with most flowers that are on plastic bases. You can wire them together to make a nice effect. So there we are with attaching flowers. Right, now this time we're talking about attaching feathers. So what I've got here is a quill, a black quill, so I'm using black thread. I've done a needle with double thread, and I'm going to go through the other side. I don't want the knot to be seen on this side. And now what I do is I heat the needle up. So heat the needle up till it's quite hot. Doesn't do your needles a lot of good, this, I have to say. And poke it through wherever you're going to be stitching your quill. Now, because you've heated the needle up, it will burn a hole through the quill. And then that way you can stitch down and it's virtually invisible if you stitch it carefully enough, which I'm not doing. Okay, and you can do that, you know, in a few places, because if you only do it in one place, it will bounce, the feather will bounce. So if you do it in another place, say for example a little bit further down. Oh, my needle's not hot anymore. Let's heat the needle up. Ow, now the needle's hot. I've just burnt my finger. Be careful, folks. That's too hot to handle. That's all right. Yeah. So now the feather won't bounce about because you've done more than one place, and that's the best way to attach a lot of feathers. If they've got a thick enough quill down the middle, you can do this with most sort of large feathers. If you're talking small feathers, nah, you've got to glue or stitch those into a bundle and then stitch them or glue them in place. But there you are. You've got your quill in place. You'd finish off your stitching. Sometimes it's not, if your stitching does show, if you're not very happy with your stitching, a little bit of cinnamon cut into a ribbony effect. And you can just glue that down over the top in a neater fashion than I've done there, but up to you entirely. But you shouldn't need it if you stitch in enough places and you tie off your thread nice and tight. So there we are, attaching quills. Thanks a lot. If you like my videos, do please subscribe and click the notification button to know what's going on. And if you'd like to become a member, we have competitions and bonuses for our members. Thanks a lot. Bye.